Kumlan of like Gemara. Don't know if this is the first, but we're giving a share in Daf Yomi in Dubai airport. To Mavaro, the Tzutzim here, and elevate this place. Okay, we're up to now the the fifth Pedic and Naidish and Espatata. Sorry, the fourth Pedic, Naidish and Espatata. Today's blot is Daf Mem Beis. This is Wednesday's Gemara, and we'll start from the beginning of the Pedic, which is actually Daf Mem Aleph on the base at the bottom. Naidish and Espatata. So this Naida that was seduced, and we said before the number of payments of Boishta, her shame, Upagama, and the devaluation, Uknosa, and a penalty, Shalavi, they all go to her father. But Vahatsar, the pain that she endures, that's payment number 4. That only applies to a tfusa, someone who was forced upon, not if she was seduced and she was complicit. And it also goes to the father. The bedin. What happened? She went to a din Torah, and the din Torah paskin that they have to make all these payments, but the poil they didn't actually pay it. Actually mess up, and it didn't take place while the father was still alive. Hadei Shalom. So the father already acquired it. Mesa, the father died, doesn't go back to her. Hadei Shalom, like any other inheritance. Or below you speak a lambedin. If the court case didn't take place until after the father died, then Hadei Shalom. Then she's the one who's entitled to all these monies. Similar thing. The bedin. She went to the Torah actually before she matured, before she became an adult, 12 and a half. The father's entitled to it. The father died, like any other inheritance. If she did not go to attend the Torah until she matured, then they all go to herself. That's what the Tanakhama holds. Shimon disagrees. He says the criteria here is not the Bezdin. It's actual payment. Shimon says, if she did not receive payment until the father died, if the payment did not happen until after the father's death, then it goes to her. So all her earnings and anything that she finds, and those things, even though you didn't collect it yet, father died, that goes to the brothers. Why? Because as soon as there's an entitlement there of a wage, it automatically belongs to the father. It's different than a penalty, because by a penalty, as long as you didn't go to court, there's no penalty. If you steal, you only chayiv them for the gneva, and it's the bezin and the witnesses that create the chiv of the knas. And so therefore there's no money until you go to Din Torah. And the best proof is, what happens if you're moed to be knas, you're pot, you don't have to pay. So the bezin is the one who has to administer or has to create that obligation. Mashaying wages and all that, the obligation is already there even before you collect. Says the Gemara, what's the chiddush of the Mishnah? We already learned. It seems the Mishnah is trying to tell you that the mafata is entitled to 3 payments and an anusa is to 4. We already learned that previously. But oinus abba, mafata nois and boisig is boisig shame pagam the knas, and moisel of oinus he adds shenois atzar gives also the pain. Love, you're right. The chiddush here is lavi. It goes to the father. Says the father, lavi nami pshita. We knew that. The kuyav mefata, and the best proof is the mefata gets these payments. She was complicit. Why should she get any payment? Obviously, it goes to the father, and he wasn't complicit in it. Why should you give him? Why should you give it at all? Medaita, but she was involved. So Gemara says, so once it goes back to the question, what is the chiddush of this Mishnah? The chiddush of the Mishnah is that the bedin needs to tell you, to inform you about the argument of Shir Rabbanan, whether it has to do with Amida Bedin when you go to court, that's the pivotal moment, or when the money is transferred into the hand. But even after you go to court and Bezin's sentence that you have to pay a knas, it's still considered a knas until actually the money is passed over. So now we're going to have an interesting discussion. As we learned, he said that this man accused him that you forced yourself on my daughter, seduced her, who he denies it. I did not. Now the law is that if you make this your claim and you make a shvur that it never happened, turned out to be that you lied, and you conceded that you lied, then you have to pay the principal, you have to pay a fifth, and you have to bring a carbon asham is bring a carbon asham. So here's a similar case, but this is not talking about the general case of the pasuk talks about, which is a loan or stolen, whatever it is. It's more a case of knas. And the man says, I'm going to make you swear that you actually cursed my daughter, and he says, Amen, yeah, I swear that I didn't. And afterwards he admitted, Chacham say that in this case he has to pay, like any other thing. He has to pay the Ken, the Chemish, and the Asham Be'ilas. However, Rab Shimon disagrees. He says, Potter, why? She'ena Mishalan Knasa Piatzva. He says, what did he admit to? He admitted to a knas, to a penalty, and then the other payments come as a result of that. But he essentially it's about a penalty, and a penalty. If he would have admitted it, he wouldn't have to pay at all. So what did he deny? He denied something which wasn't really a payment, and therefore there's no din of carbon shul and all that. And the Chachamim will soon tomorrow explain later. It considers it like money, and therefore you denied money, just like you're denying a loan, and you have to pay all the payments. Amalei said they responded of Shimon. You're right. One is if you admit to something that there's a penalty to it, you don't have to pay it. But there are other payments involved. There's boishes, shame, pagam. That's value. That isn't a penalty is a fixed amount, but the boishes pagam is all relative. So the commensurate to the kind of shame, the kind of status of this person. So therefore, that's moment. So now we're going to have a series of questions about to Rabbah, and eventually will lead to the conclusion about understanding the argument between Shimon and Chacham. So Rabba comes along and asks a Rabba question. It says, the guy says his friend Anasto, but he says, you, and this is my daughter, and he goes a step further. And we took it to the entire and they accuse you and they sent them that you have to owe me money. So now he's saying that it was a din Torah. It now converted to money. And he denies it. Of course, but you see, it never happened. I never owed you money. And he swore. But later he changed his mind as Maida. So what's he denying? Was this a case of mammon? Therefore, there's a general case that you have to pay that fifth and you have to pay the carbon, or this is still considered essentially a case of knas, and therefore there's nothing. So that Rab Shimon, who says they hold even without Hamad Bedin, they say it's considered money. But according to Rab Shimon, who says that it's considered knas, what about in this case where we talked about a court case as well? The question is, since we went to court case, it turned into money, and therefore you denied money, and therefore it didn't come into play. Even though you went to din trader, it's only a penalty. He said to him, it is money. He said to him, it is money. This was Abba said to him, I think. Once they went to a bezin, it now converted to a case of money. You have to pay this money. And therefore, if you deny it, you have a carbon shvur. Comes along a buy and says, Ace will have a question. It says, in a Bryce, Rab Shimon says, Yochel, I would have thought. If someone has his friend on Nasto Patisis BT Yumanis, my daughter, and he denies it, it never happened, or he accuses him another kind of a class. Hey, Mishorchas, Abdi, my slave, your animal killed my slave, never happened. Or he said to him, let's say the Eva Kanani said to him, he palta shini, you knocked out my tooth. The Simi says, I know you blinded me, and therefore I'm free. Mostly never happened, never knocked out your tooth, and never blinded you. Then he swore, and then he had to admit that he lied. But these are all examples of a knas. These are fixed amounts. Says a pasuk, what are the examples of Torah gives when you deny that and then you concede, you swore false, and you concede that you pay these penalties? It says the kichish ba'amisa, you denied your friend with the cotton in case I'm keeping Mishal alone because of stealing and you robbed your friend, or you found an object, and you falsified. So all of these are examples of money. Money and not penalty. Exception is anything which is a penalty and you deny it, since if you, as Rashi said before, if you would have been made to the penalty, you wouldn't have to pay it at all. So what I deny something that maybe is money, maybe isn't. My love, so Bai goes a bit further. Isn't it also talking about Kisha Amad Bedin? It's also talking about that even though we went to one bezin, and the accusation was that we you already had to pay these knasses based on witnesses, so it turned into money. And yet it seems clear to me that because essentially it's a knas, there's no din of carbon shua. There's a question of as long as essentially it's a knas, we don't care what state it's right now. So they play. Not like Rabba said. That's Abai's question. Says the Gemara, no. What forced him to say he's talking about Amad Bedin? Part of his question, we'll soon see. So Rabba says, Mishalayim Bedin. There's no court case involved. That's why it's knas, and that's why there's no shua sa'edus here. Says there's no shamilas. Says the Gemara, there's no shamilas. Says the Gemara, Amad Bedin. Since the beginning of the Brisa, definitely talking about they went to Din Torah. What's the beginning of the Brisa? We'll see in a minute. Sefer Namish Din. The Sefer is also talking about they went to a Din Torah. What's the story? The Tony, it says that Aisha ainly Eladvarim Shemeshalmin Alein Saket. All all I know is that we're talking about that a person has to pay the carbon, Shami Ilis, and he has to pay, the carbon for the shvua, and he has to pay the chaimish only with vodim shebashamim seket. Only things where there is a print, there's only money involved. Yeah, but Tashlum capable paying double, which is knas. Tashlum paying 4 times knas. Einis mefata umaytishav, all example of knas. Menayin, how do you know? So this Brisa holds. How do you know over here? Also, you have to pay if you deny this carbon shvur. Talmud it says umalu ma'alamal. It says as long as you stole and you lied. Is so by saying ma'alamal, which is an extra like a repetition. So he comes to say that even if you deny a knas, a payment of knas, you have to bring this carbon shvur. Saying Riba, what's the case that we include? If they never went to Din Torah, there's no kefil. You don't pay kefil if you went forward and if you came forward and you admitted you stole it, you just pay the principal and that's it. And it says here talking about kefil. The only case you can have kefil is if you went to court. Went to court. So it's talking about a case that you went to court, and therefore we say that if you deny it, you pay the sham. So we're talking about the ratio where you went to court. And then comes along Reb Shimon and says, no, that you don't have to pay. So clearly he's talking about even though you went to court and you deny it, there's no din of the carbon. Question on Rabba. I'm assuming the Sefer that Reb Shimon is arguing them exact same thing, the same case they're talking about what they're arguing. So that was a very interesting. I could tell you that Reisha, the beginning is Kasham B'Vedin. I could answer you the Reisha, yes. The Reisha talking about they did go to court, and Reb Shimon was talking about different cases, didn't go to court. The Sefer B'Shlomadin, Reb Shimon talking about now. And I can tell you that, in fact, I'll say, instead of saying the beginning is somebody else, and Reb Shimon is somebody else, what they're arguing, but cool Reb Shimon. I can tell you in the Thai Bryce of Shimon. First, he talks about where they did go to court, they talk about didn't go to court. But I don't want to give such a terrible answer because you're going to tell me right away. And you are by being so sharp. Because why does it say Reb Shimon's name right in the middle? It should either be the opening statement of Shimon says because he's saying the Thai Bryce or at the very end. You tell me, at least in the Reisha, either say in the beginning of Shimon, Shimon says, or at least the Sefer, tell me at the very end, give it up Shimon. Ella, I'll tell you better. Kula b'sh'amavadin. The Thai Bryce talking about they went to Din Torah. Less of us. So if it went to Din Torah and yet you see Reb Shimon says there's no din of a carbon, not like Rabbah, it does not convert into money. But Reb Shimon. But I'll tell you what. I agree with you that when I said it's money, it was not regarding the carbon. It was regarding that we know that a father cannot inherit to his children a penalty that he had. It cannot be married to his children a knas. And I admitted that if they went to court, it's no longer knas except mammon, and therefore the father can pass it on. I wasn't referring to the case of oinus. There, I agree that it's essentially that once you what do you call it? That I agree that it's essentially knas. According to Reb Shimon, you never. If you deny it, you're not denying money. You're denying something that could have been, could have not have been, and you don't bring a carbon. In carbon shvur, the Rachmana parted carbon shvur that it says the chichesh in the examples we give. There's no class involved. So therefore, in the case of the oinus and according to Reb Shimon, you do no carbon shvur. The chika mina mammon have when I said it's money, the father can pass it on to his children. And once it went to Din Torah, it's now considered money, and therefore, if he dies, it passes on to the children and doesn't go to her. So the Gemara, shall ask another question. Reb Shimon says, he's speaking with the they didn't collect the money till the father dies. So the Reb Shimon says it depends when the money is transferred, and then it said therefore the father died before the money was transferred, it goes to her. Now, you're telling me that Reb Shimon is murder when it be but you tell me mom and how you're telling me what? That when it comes that once you went to Din Torah, as far except carbon, as far as everybody else, every other angle aspect is considered money, and you can pass it on to the children. So once it's Bezin Paskin, why does it go to her? It should go to the brothers. La'atz mamai. The Achim Boim it should have gone to the brothers. You're saying it's considered money. Rabba says, Rabba, Hai Milsa, Kashi Bei Rabba, Rabbi Yosef, Essen V'Tartim Shneim. Rabba was the age of 18, became Rosh Yeshiva. Rabbi Yosef allowed Rabba to come to Yeshiva, even though Rabbi Yosef was older. And for 22 years, and then Rabbi passed away at the age of 40 because he's a descendant of the family of Eli, and Rabbi Yosef took over. For during those 22 years, the Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef were trying to work this out. They couldn't understand why Taka did Rabbi Shimon say in our mission it goes to her, it should go to the brothers because it's money. As soon as the Bezin Paskin, it becomes a case of money and should pass on to the normal laws of inheritance. It couldn't find an answer. Ad the Yosef Rabbi Yosef Bereisha, until Rabbi Yosef became the head of the Rosh Hashiva, the king of Shiva, and suddenly Upirka, he was able to answer it. And Rashi says here very interesting that once he became Rosh Hashiva, the same person suddenly had Sayato Deshmaya, and Rashi adds 3 words: Liyos loy l'shem. It's as if to say that the Abisha deliberately gave Rabbi Yosef the power. Everybody was saying Rabbi was so much sharper than Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef was seen that Rabbi was Eiger Harim, but the Abisha gave Rabbi Yosef the chance to come up with an answer that Rabbi was stumped, and people will suddenly have respect for Rabbi Yosef as well, and they'll also start respecting him. Fascinating. Until we answered, and the answer is follows. Shani Hossam is different. On Makro, it says the positive why when it comes to Knas of Einus and Peter, do we say it's a transfer of money, not the Psaka Bezin? Because the positive says the man who had relation with her should give to the father the night of 50. It says the Nasa. And he gave. In other words, when this all happened, when he gave it. This is a special pasuk that says that even though Bezin Paskin does not have a din of money to pass on to the children unless he received the money already. What Rabbi was saying that it's because once Bezin Paskin is now money, he can pass it on to the children. He was talking about Bashar Knossos. All other penalties. Says you so by Ebed, when you kill them, you have to pay $30. It says Kesef Shleishim Shkalim Adonai, but it says also the word Yitain. Hachinami leZich Satrel Adam Mashas Nasina. So you can say where there also does not belong to the master until he actually received the money. Then why don't you say that 2 exceptions? Not just it's also Ebed. So Gemara says Yitain lechud v'nosan. Yitain and nos are very different. Yitain sounds like instructions you have to give. But nosa means and you already gave. So why do we say the word lechicha should tell me that it does not have a din of money and therefore you don't have to pay the carbon because it says the lechicha denying all the examples the trader gives of money cases and not a case of pitu and oinus tamulaim of the nasr, but I should have said the word v'nasr. That actually it's not only the bezin, you have to actually transfer the money. Omar Rava, so Rava says you're right. Ki itzich v'chichesh. You know why we need case of v'chichesh? In the following case. In the following example, you went to the trade, and then ubogra, and then you went to the trade, and then she became an adult, but Mesa, and then she died. Who inherits it? The house over there, her father inherits it, but not because initially, when the Bezin Paskin became his, is not right because it did not become his yet, so he gave it over to him. But then when she became she therefore she was entitled to it. Then she died. So now the father inherits it as a daughter. The father inherits the daughter. The husband, he ashes from her directly. He ashes from her. And therefore, here you can't use the word v'nasa, because this actually the money belonged to the daughter, because she became a begeris before the money was transferred. As Rav Shimon says, then in that case, it goes to the daughter. But the father ultimately gets it because he yashes the daughter if she died. And therefore, you cannot learn from V'nasa that it goes to the children. Therefore, we learn from the word kish. So yotzu elishen knas maman who if so, why does it say that what that you tell me the knas of einus and mefata is different than all other knasses? Yeah. Yeah, if so, that the Braisa is talking about a case where they went to Dintera, and Bezin said you have to pay knas, right? You pay knas, and then she became a bageris. So with the money before he got it, the money went to her, supposed to go to her, and then she died. So therefore, the father yashed directly from her, So and she has a schus before collected. Only if nothing goes if it goes directly to the father, but if it goes to her, it became hers even before she collected it. And so therefore it is. So in that case, it's no different than any other class. If it goes directly to the daughter, then as soon as the bezin paskind and she became a getters, it's owed to her, and therefore Reb Shimon has to say that this knas, even in that case, if he denies it, where do we learn out that it's different from all other cases of the word b'chichesh? And why? Because essentially it's knas. not because you didn't give it to the father, because this is the case we're supposed to go directly to the daughter, because she became a begaris. And nevertheless, if she died, and then the father accuses whatever, says this whole story, and he denies it, then he admits that yes, we did go to Bez and everything else. In that case, why doesn't he have to? Why don't you bring a karma shvua? Not because of a nos, because it's supposed to go to the daughter, but the daughter goes directly to her, but rather because of a kichesh. Yeah. So right now we have that according to Rabbi in Rab Shimon, that the korban shvua has a different din of knas regarding than compared to all other knasses. Because all other knasses, as soon as you go to the Torah, a bezin paskas, it turns into mammon. And therefore, if you and now if you're made to it, you are chayiv, right? If you deny you're chayiv because it's mammon. But nevertheless, yeah. What do you call it? And that's as far as concerns that it passes on Yerush and everything else, but not covering Karmashur could be equal to Knas. So the Gemara has a question. Eitel has a question. Abaya asked about another question. It says, if a person says to his friend that you were ma'an as my daughter, and he said, "Oh, it's never happened." He said, "I swear," and he says, "I make you swear," and he says, "Yes, amen." And then he admits that he lies. Chayiv shua. Shimon, the point of Shimon Patas. Why? He says you don't pay knas. And if you're made, you don't pay knas. If you deny it, you're not really denying anything. So you're not really denying mammon, right? Could be you never even chayiv in the first place. So, in other words, what's Rav Shimon's wording here is that it's not because something unique about Einus and Mefate, like we were saying before, but rather this is like any other Kanas, and every Kanas should be the same din. A Kanas is that you don't get the time, and the only reason is Lamavadin. So the only reason is because you didn't go to the Torah. Why? Because it's still called a Kanas. The moment Bezin, you went to Amadin, but how you went to the din that Bezin Paski, all this money, it's no longer a Kanas, it's Mammon. Is carbon shvur. Therefore, you should pay a carbon shvur as well. And it's no different than anything else. Why does Rabbi say that that one that eat by knas, eat by onis and pit mefata, even after Bedin, there's no din of a carbon shvur? Why not? It's like another knas. So the Gemara says. So Rabbi says back. No, when he used those words, because you don't pay knas al piyatzma, as if it's like common with all other knasses. Shimon the different one company. He's talking to the rabbanon. Lidi quote me. I even if you went in Torah, the Achman the pot of the Torah patas even the kichesh. From the word kichesh, we know that that essentially it's a knas. Even if you went in the Torah, it's a knas, and therefore you don't have to pay kamashua. According to you, ideally is me be made a heiche the loyam victim. If we did not go to the Torah, you should be made at least that is considered a kanas because you could always, admit it. Then you don't have to pay it all, and you shouldn't bring a karma shvua. And why do you chacham hold that even then you bring a karma shvua even if you didn't go to the Torah? So what about hold? Why taka? Right. When you claim that your daughter was nenes, you're not only asking for the kanas kikotava. Actually, you're asking mainly for the baishas begam kotava. So you're asking for money. That's why if he denied it, he's denying the baishas begam, and therefore brings karma shvua. And Reb Shimon says no. The mainly asking is the knas, and therefore if he denies it, he's only denying a knas. The ma'ikah, what's the crux of their argument? I want a papa. Reb Shimon saw the kai is a person is not going to leave behind something that has a fixed amount of tovim l'kites. The $30, the $50 is 50 shkolim is right there, so easy. Everything else you have to assess. So he's starting out with a 50. So he's talking about the knas. And Rabban holds a shavik inish midachi moidi be'lemifta. The Rabban hold you want a much stronger claim. If you're going to ask for the knas and he admits it, that's it. You don't get anything. It's only if he denies it that you get the knas. So then you're rather asked the baishas and the begam that even if he admits it, he's supposed to pay it because you've affected her in that way. But no one will do that. So that is the machlekes will be having chacham and Rab Shimon. So first they argue, when does the knas of oinus mefata? Do we say that's now considered mammon? And if you would made it now, you no longer potter. According to Chacham, the moment to the Torah, that's it. Bezin, it's mammon. You can't deny anymore. According to Shimon, only when you transfer the money to the hand. And also regarding a korban shvua, if you deny it, you have to pay. And then you admit that you swore false. You have to pay. According to Chacham, you chayav a korban shvua, because what are you focusing on when the person made the claim? He was focusing on the baishas begam, on the money side of it. And Shimon holds no, you're focusing on the knas because that's much easier, and therefore you don't. And then generally, if you bring a korban shvua on something that started out as a knas, according to the Chachamim, once you went to bezin, it became money, and therefore if you deny it, you chayav a korban shvua. According to Shimon, since essentially it's knas, you don't bring a korban shvua.